Monday the 3rd of September, I'm here with Dom for our Cryptonuts podcast number 4, and today we're going to talk about blockchain platforms and decentralized applications and what that means for the space. And anyone that's new to our podcast or new to blockchain, hopefully what is in line for the future. Now, we've got a little clock here which I mentioned in our last podcast to try to keep us honest, and I've set 20 minutes on it. And what we're going to try to do is keep this discussion to 20 minutes, and hopefully if it ends short, then we'll end short, but if it keeps going and it's worthy, we'll keep going. So Dom's going to kick it off today and start talking about some decentralized and probably some centralized platforms in the blockchain space. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dom. I'm going to press play on this little clock. 20 minutes. That's started, so off you go, buddy. What have you got?
Morning, guys. Okay, it's nice to be back. We're going to talk about platforms. Before we do, I think we just have to get our head around some of the technology and some of the problems that we have with the blockchain. Blockchain, as we know, is a distributed ledger guaranteed to be trustworthy and immutable. However, it's slow. Bitcoin, 10 minutes. Ethereum, 10 to 15 seconds, 20 seconds in many cases. Neo, 13.5 seconds. And these are the limitations of the blockchain. And there's a big issue around scaling. So before we go into the platforms, I just want to talk briefly about the scaling issues and the resolutions that have come, because this is going to integrate very nicely with what the platforms are doing. We know that Bitcoin and Litecoin have been working on for some time the Lightning Network. And SegWit was a pathway to achieve that. And what Lightning Network is that individuals can open nodes and they use an onion routing to actually get the transactions in that node routed from one to the next. It's also called sharding. And what happens is, like an onion, the reason why it's called onion is that the layers know the previous layer and the next layer. They don't know anything other than that. So the routing enables for privacy. And once the node is with the predetermined amount of shards, then that is broadcast to the blockchain, and then that is put on the ledger. The interesting thing about this is that when things are in that node, they are absolutely private. It's as close as you're going to get to actually spending cash for small items or even larger amounts. And that gives you the freedom that we enjoy with cash right now. There's no tracking. But this technology is done off-chain. It is not on the main chain. It's done off-chain in nodes. And those nodes are not visible. Even if you could see there's about 1,200 nodes right now on Lightning Network operating, you cannot see any of the transactions. And that's a very important feature, because the one thing about blockchain is that it's immutable, but it's also no privacy. You can see exactly what is happening in everybody's wallet. You knew the address. And government organizations have got tracking programs that can, the moment you go into a KYC website or anything that identifies you to a particular wallet, any transaction after that is visible no matter what happens. So let's bear in mind that we are talking about off-chain solutions, which is the Lightning Network. Now, we have store of value coins, specifically like Bitcoin and Litecoin. We have platforms like Ethereum, Neo, ICX, Waves, all these other platforms, but they're also a store of value. You can actually trade them as value. The only difference between them is the fact that they allow for more complicated virtual machine runtimes on their platforms, which actually run contracts. There is a third generation of platforms, one of them being EOS and the other one being ELASTOS. These are actually operating systems. And I just want to go into the mechanics of ELASTOS, because I think it's a very misunderstood concept and what relationship that has with Neo and the future of contracts. ELASTOS actually started as an ERC20 token, and it migrated to its own blockchain earlier this year. Rong Cheng actually worked for Microsoft for 8 years, and he left to go back to China in the year 2000. He had a different vision of the internet. And it was only in the introduction of blockchain that he found his missing link, excuse the pun. His concept is that peer-to-peer web browsing or operating through the web is done through an operating system and not on an open platform. Now, this sounds radical, and what are the benefits of that, and why should we even consider this? Well, the blockchain in ELASTOS is actually an identification blockchain, where the ID of intellectual property, data, anything that's tokenized has an identity which is on the chain. Now, because you're not putting transactions through the chain, you're only using it for the ID, you don't have the scalability issues, because once you go onto the ELASTOS platform, you communicate directly peer-to-peer in a mesh network, which means that you can literally have billions of operating dApps communicating with each other independent of the blockchain. The blockchain there is for identification purposes. Now, dApps can be built on ELASTOS, the same as NEO. In essence, it's the same. It's an opposition company to NEO, an opposition company to Ethereum. They will run parallel chains. So dApps or ICOs can commence operating on a parallel chain, but all the identification features of the IP is shared amongst the chains. So the trust, so to speak, of the ID is on the ELASTOS main chain. Now, the concept of a peer-to-peer operating system means that when you log into an app, you don't go to a URL, you actually connecting via code. And that links you directly with the platform or the operating system that you want to use, the dApp that you want to use. It eliminates DDoS attacks. It eliminates all the hacking and all the malicious malware and all these other things that make the internet really unsafe. So ELASTOS is an operating system for the internet, which is a paradigm shift from where we stand. In terms of the ELASTOS program, there has been two main angel investors. One was Johan Wu from Bitmain and Dawnfei from NEO. They are advisors on ELASTOS, and they're also the initial angel investors. And the current ELASTOS system, a blockchain, operates on the same algorithm as the Bitcoin algorithm. And it is mined in conjunction with Bitcoin through a process called merge mining. And that's obviously where Bitmain comes in. Merge mining will make it a greener, more efficient way of mining because it is mined simultaneously with Bitcoin. And you can see that strategically, this has been done to secure the actual ELASTOS network. Dawnfei on NEO, we will discuss, they will also be contributing to the smart economy. And the one thing I do like about the Chinese approach to the blockchain is they've systematically looked at all the elements that need to be incorporated in a smart economy, and they're making them all cross-linkable and interchain compatibility. And we'll go through this in a short while because that is the secret. It's not like Ethereum that's trying to squeeze everything through one blockchain. They will do it in a different manner, and they will be addressing this scalability issue differently.
Are they going to be using side
Now,
chains?
you may think...
They're going to be using side chains and parallel chains?
Yes. ELASTOS, all the dApps built on ELASTOS will have the ability to do side chains. ELASTOS will be providing the IP identity, which will be encrypted, which will give value to the intellectual property, whether it be video, music, or certain dApps that will run. For example, the Shanghai Automobile, a big company which is looking at electric cars, they will be using the navigational systems and operating of the software on the cars through ELASTOS. Because it's connected peer-to-peer, it will be devoid of attacks and security. So ELASTOS will do to the web what the electric car is going to do to petroleum cars. That's how I see it. It's going to be a true Web 3.0. I think it's an exceptionally underrated project, and people don't understand what ELASTOS is. It is a very ambitious project. They currently have 60 people working. That's their team, including the team are government advisors to make sure that they are totally compliant with the Chinese government. And although the environment for Chinese ICOs or crypto-friendly is not there yet, there's a preparation taking place to make things compliant. And when China is eventually crypto-friendly, you will see these platforms take off. Part of the platform, there's a G3, which is a combination of ELASTOS, NEO, and Bitmain. The G3 network is primarily to get government consensus and legitimate legislation passed which will comply with regulators. It's a big issue. I mean, that's what's really stopping the ETFs coming into fruition, the regulation. They're trying to achieve that at the same time, trying to achieve a decentralized component which offers us the privacy that we need. Now, if we move over to NEO, NEO is again, it's a platform which has been of late, subdued in a lot of senses. A few ICOs have been launched on that. But again, it's been very strategic. Ontology, which is a KYC platform, which is its own chain, and that is purely going to be based on trust. So in other words, just imagine your driver's license, your social security number, your DNA, your facial recognition, your fingerprint. Everything will be verified on the ontology network. And that chain will communicate with other NEO chains for KYC. In a fraction of a second, you'll be able to verify who you are. It will, however, and this is where the centralization aspect comes in, will we be able to trust that we will have our data secure? Well, I think the whole purpose of this is yes, we will, because technically it will be encrypted. Just the way your wallet is encrypted, you can see it, but you can't access it. In terms of KYC, you will not be able to see the KYC, but you can only access it if you have the encryption or to give permission to everyone else to see, to confirm your identity. So this whole issue of decentralization and whether we trust the system is paramount, and Ontology has addressed that directly. Now, NEO has also got another NEP5 token, which is called Trinity. Now, Trinity is their scaling solution. Other than the sharding system that is used by Bitcoin, Trinity uses a nonce system. So you'll open a node, and each subsequent nonce will be a new transaction. And once the prescribed nonces have taken place, it'll be broadcast to the network, and then it will be locked into the ledger. All these this is not a side chain, it is a second layer technology which has been applied. And that second layer technology will scale up to 1 million transactions a second, which is what we need for mass adoption. So all these platforms have addressed the scaling issue in two ways. One, by allowing us to do off-chain transactions, which are private, which everybody wants, which is equivalent to cash, and on-chain transactions where you will have several chains cross-linked, which will verify data like your educational, your insurance, your medical. ICX has gone very heavily into this overall identification and cross-chain linking through looking to identify the individual. And this is going to be something that's going to be used in future. When you go for a job, all your historical educational records and your experiences put on your ID. And as daunting as it may seem, KYC is with us. We're not going to get away with anything else other than the KYC principles. But we do want a certain amount of privacy. And that's where these off-chain second layer usage of your value is going to take place. So how far into the future ELASTOS and all these other things are going to start merging into everyday life, I'm not quite sure. But I can tell you that ELASTOS has got a lot of cooperations with the music industry, the gaming industry, the Shanghai Automobiles company, which is a very strong pretender, and they will be using ELASTOS exclusively in their automation. I must tell you that if anything was to smack of that's the way to go, is when we get self-drive vehicles, you wouldn't want anybody to hack into a self-drive vehicle. So a peer-to-peer operating system over the web seems to be an ideal solution for that. So it's got many benefits. Small market cap, it is entered the 100, undervalued project in my view. Not trying to, this is not financial advice. It is going to be the way of the future. And we will see more and more dApps built on these platforms as they start to take place. And I think that there will be a watershed time when Lightning Network will be implemented into all wallets so that you can use it. At this point in time, it's still clumsy. It needs to be moved into the background so we don't even know it's happening. And when Lightning Network starts to be used on wallets, and you can start buying coffee and small items with your Bitcoin or Litecoin, and then there's atomic swaps that you can swap other currencies. That's when we're going to see the whole crypto market take off. Just as a matter of interest, Bitcoin has hit 1.3 trillion transactions in 1 year, which is more than PayPal and Discovery. So we are getting there. Transactions per annum, we will exceed 10 trillion. So it's a very exciting future when it comes to platforms. And remember, the store of value, platform, and the new operating systems, which are platforms and encompass the whole accounting function, that is going to be the way of the future.
Is it fair to say that ELASTOS, Neo, Ontology, Trinity are all or fall under the jurisdiction of China? I think there's a lot of speculation about their social ranking system that's going to come up. I think a lot of people are concerned about KYC and giving up private information and data, and obviously that's where encryption comes on, or comes into play. Then it comes down to what you were talking about, trust, and whether or not we want to engage and trust these platforms to do the job that they say that they're going to do, especially when it comes to our private data. And I think all of those ones you just mentioned do fall under, obviously, a Chinese regime as a whole. I think there's no doubt that China likes to have control over certain platforms. It's like instead of having eBay, they've got an Alibaba, and they do tend to do and play the game their own way outside of the Western empire as such. And I think there's going to be mentions of, we talked about EOS. There's going to be the duality here. We've got the Asian markets, and then we've got EOS is looking to do very similar things. They've got delegated proof of stake, which is slightly a little bit different. I think a lot of other applications to support the ones that you just talked about will engage and do similar things. So there's going to be options for people from around the world to engage in different platforms. But I do believe that Neo, Ontology, I have been reading into ELASTOS, are very, very interesting projects. How far they're going to reach, I'm not sure. Is it going to be fairly narrow? And we're talking about China, Japan, Korea, these particular major players in the crypto market. We know that they are probably responsible for 80% of the interest in the market at the moment. The Asian market is quite large. As we get into Europe and the American markets, that there's a lot more interest in different versions of the platforms like EOS, as I've mentioned. There's no doubt, I think, when RSK comes out, we'll see Bitcoin will start being able to do smart contracts. I think that's the moment where Bitcoin will just take off, because its perceived element of use or usefulness or functionality will increase ginormously. I mean, Ethereum is obviously one of the major platforms for decentralized apps or applications using smart contracts. I think they've got 500 applications of various different functions on there now. And, you know, some of the other ones like EOS and Neo have got a handful. I think BitShares even has a handful of applications. So it's a bit of a race to see who gets... It's not about who has the most amount of applications, but I think it's about who's going to provide, you know, life-changing applications that's going to benefit society. I think China's probably, I'm not going to say guilty, but I think they could fall or could become guilty of trying to control their citizens, and that's why they've got bans in place, because they don't want competition coming on board in regards to Neo and Ontology and ELASTOS and Trinity and all these ones that you mentioned. They probably want to make sure that they maintain that market share from the start, where it's a little bit different in Western society. I mean, there are more platforms that we just don't hear about. It's probably because they don't have the attention. So where do you see the platforms in the next 12 months? Like, do you see it actually being divided between West and East?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think this decentralized, centralized argument, you can go around. Essentially, we want to hold our private keys. We want to be able to transact with our funds, whether it be to install a new contract or to actually spend and buy a cup of coffee. We don't necessarily want everyone to be scrutinizing every single transaction that we have. So I think all the platforms, Raiden, Trinity, Lightning Network, have addressed this issue from day-to-day life, which was the intention of Nakamoto Satoshi to actually use digital currency in an everyday environment. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is when you start doing ICOs, and there's a lot of shit ICOs. There's a lot of shit coins out there, and there's a lot of scams taking place. And governments have been very looked down upon this, and because essentially, whether we like it or not, government is to a degree in charge, and they've got to look after the welfare of their people. So China just bans everything until it can get control, because I don't think they want to. They don't want to run the risk of losing control of any sector of their economy, which is a problem. Yes, but within that, there's the mechanism where they're not really interested in what people are spending on their coffee or their groceries or buying a bike or whatever it is. They're not really interested in that. They want to do a global sort of over-the-top analysis of the market to make sure that there's no scammers and that it will not jeopardize their power base and threatens their way of life. So the truth of the matter is the blockchain will erode all the power bases that, as we understand it. Because the Neo platform, yes, it will have all these side chains, and anyone who builds anything on the Neo platform will have the interchain compatibility of using Ontology to do KYC, which, as long as the crypto market is connected to the fiat world, KYC is going to be something in the middle which we cannot avoid. Without that regulation, we cannot trade in crypto, unless, of course, you just want to trade in the crypto world and you never come over to the fiat world, which is not the purpose. Eventually, we will no longer have a fiat world. We will all be in the crypto world, and it will be a process of going through the elimination of fiat and favoring crypto. Just as a matter of interest, the fiat world, as we know, has only got a small percent of circulating currency. The rest is digital. So it's already moving towards a digital economy. And what Neo and all these other platforms are doing, they're making the economy smart. They're going to make it where you don't have a middleman and you'll be able to operate peer-to-peer. It doesn't matter whether your KYC encryption is on their platform, because you will only be the only having access to that, and you will have a degree of it. But if you want to interface with these other platforms, they have to verify your identity. And that could be a double-edged sword in one sense, where without that you can't get onto the platform, but with that no one can hack you. So it's a question of how much of your freedom do you want to relinquish in order for you to enable interaction with a smart economy. I think that there will be a centralized base and a decentralized operating system around that. And the world will operate around certain core principles. Those core principles will be of trust. You need the miners. You need someone like ELASTOS to prepare an operating system that we can all use. We all currently use Google. And if there was ever one entity that is stripping of all the inputs that we put into the computer, it is watching what we do, what we say, what websites we visit, what marketing, and the artificial intelligence, it's analyzing all this data and it's using to Google's benefit to make money. We're not making any money with our data. So I think that the moment you go into blockchain where you do get rewarded for your data, it will involve a certain amount of relinquishing of privacy, but nevertheless, that data will be yours, not given to Facebook or Google or Apple or whatever it is that are currently stripping us of our privacy. And I think that we have to be realistic in this. The current systems that are in place right now on the internet rob us of all the information that we enter. And we are willing guinea pigs by clicking on the I agree to relinquish all our trust. And I think that this is probably the worst part of this whole thing with the web at the moment. Now, if you can eliminate that, like Substratum is doing that with DNS so that they've got, you will be operating peer-to-peer. ELASTOS, which will be a new operating system, which will allow for peer-to-peer direct communication, devoid of all the monitoring and gathering of information of these big corporations. It must be a win. So, is decentralization bad? Yes, if it's taken advantage of. But it's not bad if it's there to protect you. And especially if you still have the ability to be working on a peer-to-peer basis, in control of your own keys, in control of your own funds, and you choose who to interact with. There is too much damage to dominate. And what's going to happen is the consensus of the population will migrate to the platform that will line up with their alignments of value, privacy, and everything else. So I welcome all this competition that we have out there. I think it is going to be a really interesting development where the population will determine which platforms succeed and which platforms fail. And that will be dependent on privacy, ease of use, trust, reliability, and efficiency. And that's really what we want. The vast majority of people today are in cryptocurrency, not for the dApps and not for the future vision. Some are. I think it's a mixture. I'm in for both. They're looking at it purely as an instrument of gaining wealth. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a marvelous opportunity and one of the opportunities that will not exist ever again, I think, once it comes to its full maturity. It is an amazing opportunity to create wealth at early stages. And if you've got the guts to enter the market and put your money where your mouth is, you will be rewarded. You have to do your due diligence. You have to investigate what papers you want to look at. I encourage everyone to read white papers and understand the technology. That way you can choose and make intelligent choices of the platforms that you want to support.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that we do have choices. Some people don't like making choices, so those choices will be made for them. And you know, really, that's something I'm keeping my eye on. I'm not a fan of being told what to do in regards to decisions. So you know, that's where the governments may come in future and start laying out certain regulatory guidelines in regards to what they feel will be an appropriate platform. You know, like I said, China will have their own, and I think America and the Western world will have their own. There's no doubt we'll be able to interact with both. I think some of the applications on some of the Chinese ones will actually be for, you know, Chinese applications. Might not even be able to read the language. You know, but that's changing. You'll be able to adjust it and be a part of it. You mentioned encryption and security and privacy and data skimming, and I think that is a major part of my concern. I mean, it's not I'm hiding anything. I think it's just I'm a big ambassador for basic human rights, and I think having privacy is really important. And I think, that's probably where I'm, the Chinese platforms, I'm sort of mindful. Maybe it will be used for their own benefit or the government's benefit. That's why I like the idea of EOS. One of the taglines that Dan Larimer goes around saying, and hashtag make governments irrelevant. I think he's got something in the background. I think he'll be working towards very similar applications as you've mentioned for the Chinese, and hopefully we will see a moment where governments do become irrelevant, because we'll be able to have a group consensus on a blockchain fully encrypted with control. We'll probably have our own digital IDs. We'll have our own privacy hubs. As long as the power is put back into the individual, I'm pretty happy. If it's put into the power of a democracy or a communist regime, I'm not happy.
No.
And I think that's where a lot of the speculation and a lot of the fear is in regards to blockchain. And we've had some comments on some of our previous videos about, globalism and the concern of the power being manipulated to a select few. There's no doubt that could happen. I think it will happen in certain platforms. So what we've got to do as individuals is do the research, and depending on your values, position yourself with the platforms that are going to align with what you stand for. And I think that's a journey that we have to actually be patient with, because it's still in its infancy, and a lot of these platforms haven't truly shown their capacity or capabilities yet, let alone all the platforms being live. And we know a lot of them are only just clicked over to mainnet. A lot of applications are still in concept stage. So
yes.
Well, we've gone for 32 minutes, Dom.
Wow.
32 minutes. Now I made an error on my little clock here. I set it for 19 hours. However, it does show that we've gone for 32 minutes, and like these particular conversations, we could talk for hours on them. There's no doubt we've talked a little bit about ELASTOS, ontology. We've talked about NEO and EOS from a general point of view in regards to an overall possible benefit for society in future, but it's in an evolving space. And I think we can expand on it in future. I think we can talk about what NEO is going to bring from an application point of view. Ontology, you talked about as being a KYC point of call. I talked about ELASTOS. I don't know a lot about ELASTOS. I think you know a little bit more than I do. You're talking about it being a background operating system. I don't know much about Trinity. I know EOS is going to be an overall community-driven platform that's probably going to have a lot of similar type of applications as we've mentioned. Where's Ethereum going to be in 10 years? Are they going to be able to scale? Are they developing similar protocols as well? I think they're going to have to if they want to keep up.
Well, Metropolis is on its way. I mean, it's going to be here this year, towards the end of this year. I think the proof of work is going. I mean, talking about the reward system being reduced from 3 to 2, so proof of stake is going to be an issue. I mean, ELASTOS is operating on the mining algorithm, but they're also going to be going on to delegated proof of stake later on. So it's an evolving space, as is our political structure all over the world. We've got dictatorships, we've got so-called democracies, we've got a myriad of things all over the world, and it's the same with the crypto sphere. But I see that all this is just a reflection of the mood of the planet. And as we become more mature and more civilized, we will eventually, I believe, do away with governments. We will make governments irrelevant. I don't think we'll do away with them. They will make them irrelevant. The blockchain and the way we operate is going to be, and it's all going to be by consensus, which is really an interesting concept. And I'm not quite sure how we can get our head around that at this point. It's so far removed from the way we think of things now, but it's getting there. And I think our responsibility, and all the other YouTubers and everybody else who contribute in this space, our responsibility is to communicate effectively in as short as time as possible. Sometimes it's hard to get it.
Yeah.
But we need to communicate this to educate people.
Sure. Yeah. In regards to making governments irrelevant, just remember governments are the ones that make themselves relevant. Okay. So they spend billions of dollars on fear-mongering and welfare states and trying to keep themselves in position. I already believe they're obsolete. I do believe they're at the end. I can see, and this is I'll put this out there for the universe. I can see governments being dissolved and a group consensus, decentralized consensus, being moved to blockchain. So all the existing infrastructure, you could talk about all the departments, could move to blockchain. And we could have even like a delegated proof of stake based administration system, no parties or two-party preference democracies, none of that. And we all link up via smart devices to participate in a decentralized community that still has laws based on common law and still has all the infrastructure, and you know, there is structure based an understanding that we can actually apply, all these departments that we see here in Australia. You know, we've got tourism, we've got environment, and all of these things. None of that still stands, but we just don't have the political parties getting in the way. Get rid of, they're the final middleman that we need to remove. So that's what I'm hoping for, and it's not a matter of hope. I think we will see it happen. It's just a matter of who's going to put that as a software program onto one of these blockchains and then push it through. Who's going to be the first country to actually turn it on? That's going to be an interesting time, and hopefully that's within our lifetime. And then it might create a ripple effect. As soon as people can see that we can do without government and do it on our own, would be an exciting time. So what I'm going to do, Dom, thanks for your thoughts on this. I'm going to pull the pin on it. We've gone 37 minutes. And I'm going to make sure that this clock is accurate next time. Was there. Hopefully some people got something out of that. Blockchain and all of these exciting applications. And hopefully you'll join me on the next one, Dom.
Will do.
All
okay.
Right.
Cheers,
See you soon. Whoops, I cancelled the wrong one. I did it again.